And Martin, you can add anything else, sir?
I'm not sure that there is a great deal to add beyond perhaps commenting about the town centre regeneration. The situation is still extremely fluid as to what the needs for the town centre will be in the future. If we have further lockdowns and that continues to exacerbate the shift in retail options and retail usage, it's going to create yet more. So, but at the moment, it's difficult to establish exactly which way anything is going to go. It's still a little bit steady as it goes on that. I don't think there's anything else to add.
Thank you, Martin. Good morning, Rachel. Quite glad you can make it. Okay, so we've just got to, that's all right. We've got to item 4, which is the messages from the Executive Board, which you've probably caught the last part of that. So if there are no further questions for the Executive Board on those comments, I'll move to item number 5. And this is the town centre prospectus specification. And if you remember from the last meeting, you may have had the minutes, Rachel, that we resolved that there'd be no significant change to the current prospectus specification, and there were minor amendments. Now, they weren't significant because we didn't want to be too prescriptive for the bidders. But effectively, we added information with regard to COVID-19 and trying to make the town centres more resilient, if possible, of the impact of COVID-19. And we also asked whether they could comment on the policies to stimulate development in response to COVID-19, in specifically things like getting building fund and the proposed changes maybe to the white paper as regard to planning. So those two addendums, and also active travel. So there were some extra questions asked in and around active travel and COVID-19, because obviously the prospectuses were prepared prior to COVID-19, and therefore we felt it was wise just to amend the prospectus specification to include aspects of that. So there were the minor amendments to the prospectus specifications for the town centre prospectuses. Now, as we alluded to, they are now going to interview stage, which is later this month, which is on the 21st, if I am correct, everybody. So that's the next stage. And also, if you remember, that if none of them are suitable, there is the option to go back to tender. But we will see what the interviews take place and what transpires from those. So at this stage, there's not much more to add to the town centre prospectus specification, besides the fact that we have amended it slightly as per the resolution from the last meeting. So if you've got any questions or comments on that, I'll be happy to take anything, or if not, I'll pass on to Phil, who might be able to help. But any questions? No? Okay, now, again, going on to item number 6, the active travel opportunities. Now, after the last meeting, the 3 towns should have got together, hopefully, and assessed the active travel opportunities in each of Droitwich, Evesham and Pershore. Myself, Charles and Michael met at a very socially distanced outside, just to go through some of the active travel opportunities in Pershore, but we'll wait for ours and go through perhaps alphabetically and go to Droitwich first, if any of the group in Droitwich have got the feedback for active travel opportunities in Droitwich, please.
I'm happy to take this one.
Thank you, George.
So, Droitwich has been quite busy, and we've been waiting to hear back from a few people that we've invited to get involved. Droitwich has quite an actively growing cycling club that we're eager to keep as involved as possible in anything active travel.
Excellent.
And as part of the active travel group, we're hoping to split into a few different sort of areas to look at, being increasing use, evidencing need, route design, technical specifications, and surrounding aesthetics, to try and come up with a very optimistic and all-inclusive plan for active travel. But some of the bits that we hope to look at first would be, just checking out my notes, encouraging active travel education and encouragement programs in schools, which is one of the things that a few of the members in Droitwich are hoping to spend our COVID community support funds on. Surveying residents to find out what problems existing cyclists have experienced and what would encourage new cyclists to start. And then improving cycling and bus parking and waiting areas, as buses make up part of active travel as well. So we wouldn't want the focus to be entirely on cycling, although that is a large part of it.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions on that? If not, we'll move to Evesham, if possible. Anybody like to take Evesham's active?
Will I do
Thank
that
you,
one?
Robin. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Evesham's in some ways is a bit further advanced in this, in that there's been a lot of work done by County Council Officer Henry Harbord to work on this as part of the Evesham traffic programme. And following the last meeting, I wrote to Henry asking him for an update. He sent me a copy of the application for pinch point funding, which actually included a plan for a proposed cycling and walking network for Evesham, which I can share with you if you want. It doesn't make a lot, doesn't actually tell you a lot, but I can share it if you like. Would anybody like to see that?
Yes, I think so. Yes,
I think it'd be useful, Robin,
Let's see if I
put
can do
that
that.
up on the screen.
Okay, so that might, can you see that?
I can see a blank screen, and hopefully,
Something's
a
coming.
second. Yes, I can see it now.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is progress, I think, in that it's got a number of proposed cycle paths, cycle and walking paths to link up the various parts of the town. I did ask Henry, I went back to Henry and said, can you give us any details on these particular elements? And he said, well, that will be done in the next part of the pinch point funding application if they get through the expressions of interest stage, which was slightly disappointing. But anyway, now how can I unshare that? Does anybody, before I take this away from you, are there any sort of questions or comments on that?
Well, I'm very pleased to see that there's a new walking cycling bridge.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah,
that would be a really good thing, I think.
What do you mean? You mean the one over the River Avon? That is that the one
Number
you're talking
18.
about?
Yeah.
Yes, the Hampton Bridge that
Yeah.
been long in gestation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody like to give us an update on that?
Yeah.
No.
I'd like to give you an update, if I may.
Yes.
About 3 weeks ago, I had a meeting. I was invited to a meeting to walk the, I don't know whether you can pick it out, but the route, which is, I think it's brown on the screen. This one here, yeah. But the first meeting I had, I'm invited to 2 actually over this, but I walked that route with representatives of the of the Rudge Estates and the landowners there, and Bruce was also involved in that meeting, and we walked that entire route to have a look at the issues, because apparently this route has been, you know, like the footbridge, talked about for about the last 8 years, and it's been sort of in a bit of a quagmire as far as progress is concerned. But having walked the route myself and spoken to the Rudge Estate and spoken to the landowners, I don't think there are really any insurmountable problems to actually achieving this route. If any problems do exist, it's at that very top end part, which is the little link up into the valley, which is labelled number 11 on there. I don't think that's clearly defined yet. Oh yeah, Robbie, I'm ignoring you. You were at that meeting as well. Robbie and I did speak about it afterwards, and there are one or two things that Robbie and I, one or two ideas that we've got, which actually might make it a bit better. But I won't go into those now. At that same meeting, I raised the ugly issue of the walking cycling bridge, because that is also down to the Rudge Estates, and I'm lacking in confidence that we've been kept properly up to speed on that by the county council. Admittedly, I've only heard one side of the story, but it looks very much from the response I had from the guy who's dealing with it at Rudge Estate, is that they were only really contacted about this in a meaningful way sometime in the last autumn, which I was rather disappointed about, because I think we'd been led to believe that it was much further advanced than that. It is an item which I intend to pursue. The current situation that we're being given is that the developer contribution has not been received from the developers, and the developers at Hampton are using every trick in the book to try and delay handing over that money. So I think that might be the holdup, but which is rather embarrassing, because we need to be more robust about achieving these developer contributions. It's a particular cause célèbre of mine, that developer contributions can and are often very, very difficult to get hold of. This is a significant developer contribution. It's about £1 million, and that should be in our bank, because as far as I'm aware, all of the development which related to that contribution has now been completed, sold and occupied. So I think as a council, we need to be very robust in the way in which we collect this money in. But that's a kind of slightly separate issue. But that river crossing there is key, as you can see, because once that is in place, we would basically have already in situ a pretty coherent north-south route right the way up to the valley, all the way from Hampton. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to take from now to get the common lane cycle route in place. I haven't had any follow-up meetings, but there is a meeting, Robin, as far as I'm aware, on the cards for early November now, with Nigel Huddleston to walk that section of the route, because that also forms part of a wider cycle network trying to be achieved to link up to Ulster. So there is some progress as far as I can see. However, more needs to be done. I think there is an awful lot that we can do without spending very much money at all within the town of Evesham itself. It's literally a case of marking and signage, which could be done to encourage people. I've got lots of other ideas as well, but that's probably more for discussion within our little group, but we are indeed fortunate that this groundwork has been done already by the county council, but it's still a piece of paper. It's not real, and I am very keen to discuss with the relevant people as to the how we actually act on this. How do we make this happen? How do we make it real? It's all very well having these routes drawn on a piece of paper, but really for them to be any good, they need to actually be in existence. So it needs planning, it needs funding, you know, it needs to be taken forward as a matter of some considerable urgency, in my view, because we're all aware of the reason why active travel is a multifaceted benefit, and you know, we should be acting on this now.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you, Robbie.
Yes, Robert.
You're on mute,
Robert. You're on mute.
I think it's worth adding to that, Chairman. On Route 12, I think we were all fairly surprised that it didn't hug the river as much as I thought it did. I thought it hugged the river for pretty much most of its journey. That's a good thing, I think, because it can be used much more when the river's in flood. But I think it's worthy of note, Chairman, and Peter can jump in if he disagrees with me, that the part of the footpath that begins at the bridge was not scheduled to be made up to the standard of the rest of it. And I think that was very disappointing. It's full of potholes at the minute. It's a very poor service for bikes, for pushchairs, even for pedestrians. It's a poor service. And that was not scheduled to be made up to the standard of the rest of it. And I think that was a great mistake.
Yes.
And on the footbridge, Chairman, I'm obviously going to have to declare a pecuniary interest if we discuss that any further.
Thank you very much.
Can I just come back on the footbridge point? Peter has drawn out, I very glibly said no, didn't want to give an update. Peter's drawn out the principal points, which is, I think, the fundamental problem is that the developer is trying to get out of his obligations. Why that's being allowed to drag and take the time it is, one does not know, because when you ask any further questions, you run into some avoidance stroke obfuscation, I would say. Okay.
Thank you, Martin.
Can I just go back and pick up on Robbie's point? That was part of Robbie's and my discussion on that was the reason why the paths around Evesham along the riverside are so well used is because they are very lovely places to be. So they're not only act as a route, they are also just pleasant places. So tree-lined avenues. It's every you know, with the river on one side is all rather nice. The path which runs from the Common Road Bridge up to the bypass is very much going to be slightly different to that, and it's going to be a rather sort of urbanized stretch of path with tarmac, etc., and signage, but as an urbanized sort of corridor through some cornfields or maize fields. And Robbie and I did discuss the logic of that and whether it would stand much better chance of being more regularly used if it was an extremely pretty place to be. And why couldn't it follow the line of the existing footpath, which follows the top of the riverbank, which would also avoid some of the issues which are occurring at the bottom of Blaney's Lane there. But we were hesitant to throw that into the mix because we would, you know, possibly set back the negotiations for longer than we would like to do. But some of that path, even with the existing route, where it runs underneath the bypass, will become impassable during times of flooding. But I think that's no different to any of the other sort of riverside paths that we've got in and around the town. And you know, that's obviously got to be a consideration. There is still a lot of detail to talk about on this, but I intend to push as hard as I can to get this firmly and correctly on the agenda.
Thank you very much. I will thank you, Peter. But okay, so moving on to Pershaw.
Excuse
Charles,
me.
sorry, Robin. Sorry,
I've got some other things I can update the group, the panel on.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you, Richard.
Henry also confirmed, and he's actually more confirmed than ever before, that the first draft of the Evesham Cycling and Walking Infrastructure Plan should be completed in the next month.
Wow,
that was
that's very good news.
That confirmation was given on the 2nd of the 9th. So I'm sort of holding my breath and waiting for it to arrive in my in-tray. But I think I might be contacting Henry shortly to just encourage that to happen.
That sounds positive.
Other things that have happened in the town, Chris Brooks, I came across reviewing bike parking in Evesham with Martin Rowe from Worcestershire County Council. So I hope Chris can confirm that that's going to lead to positive progress. I've been interviewed about active travel by Gemma Ranford for the Evesham Traffic Summit, which I believe is happening shortly. I'd like a bit more information on that, please. We haven't actually got together as a group, as a subgroup. Peter and I and Martin have struggled to find a common date in the diary, but hopefully we can do that before long. Looking forward to meeting the new active travel officer. And
Yes.
again, I'd like an update on that as to when that person will be appointed and what we can do to work together to make things happen. Finally, I'd like to just say thank you to Peter for expressing his opinion that robust action is needed. We've long been wanting some robust action. I know that there's been a lot of efforts from a lot of both officers and members to make these various plans come to fruition, but I hope that we can raise the temperature and raise the activity level and actually start to make things happen.
Can I echo those comments that Robin's made about, we need that action and some push is needed. I think that there may be a change in the foreseeable future on that front.
Thank you. Can I just take your 2 points there, Robin? One of which is for Chris with regard to the bike parking. Chris, have we got any further with that, by any chance?
Yeah, well, when I met Robin, we were Martin, as he says, Martin Rowe from County Council, Christine Baxter, our Parking Services Manager, and myself, were going around identifying existing bike parking provision, which is actually far more than I realised. It's funny, when you start looking for it, you realise there is more provision than you knew. Martin is in the process of spending County Council funds on upgrading some of the hoops that are in the ground to bring them to the appropriate standard. Apparently, some of the existing ones don't meet that standard. Putting some additional ones in, particularly around Merstow Green and in Market Place. And the County Council have also provided Wychlade District Council with some funding to go towards the cost of a cycle shelter to go into the short-term car park near Aldi. Now, that money was specifically for Evesham, I think probably as part of the same pot of funding that was mentioned earlier. It was Department of Transport money the County Council had. So that money will help enormously in procuring the shelters that we need to do for all three towns. So there'll be one in the central car park near Aldi, and there will also be a shelter in Pershaw and one in Droitwich. Sadly, there are not external funds available to us for those other two. But there are these funds via County Council to help with the Evesham shelter.
Thank you very much. I'll come back to you in a second, Peter, but the other point was Robin's point about the active travel officer. Do you have an update of when that person may be in position?
Yes, I do, Mark. It's the 3rd of November. Remember the 3rd of November. So
there we are, Robin. That's when the...
and it's a Karen Lewin. Just to indicate the importance of this role is, Peter, I'm sorry to correct you in terms of the common roads and the link to the valley. I joined Wychavon 23 years ago, and Fred Davis at that stage had already come up with a route and a plan to open that up. So I'm afraid it's at least 23 years old. That is a concept, and we've collected Section 106 monies off of the Valley planning application, probably going back 8 years ago, and we've got Section 106 monies remaining from the redevelopment of, I'm trying to remember the name of it, the Evesham members will remember the bacon slicing factory. Stocks Level is how I remember it. So we've got monies from that redevelopment. So crikey, that's probably over 10 years ago since that site was redeveloped. So I think that demonstrates the need to actually have somebody who's focused and can concentrate on getting these roadblocks sort of moved on there. The monies from the developers, from Bellway Homes and others to do with Hampton scheme is actually £3 million contribution. But the progress I heard this morning is the county council's actually invoiced them. So that's progress. The invoice has been sent out. It's not been paid.
Hopefully 28 days to pay maximum.
Yeah, that's
fantastic news.
But Karen, starting on the 3rd of November, I think she's going to be very busy.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll will become a good friend of ours.
Yeah.
Can I? Thank you, Rachel. Did you want to speak at all? Did you raise your hand? No. Okay.
There was a fly there.
Oh, see, sorry. Yes. All right. One last thing for you, Peter, and we'll move on to.
Sorry, I know I've got lots to say on this, but can I just make a plea to everybody when considering active travel and particularly cycling? Can we now add into that facilities and encouragement for e-bikes? E-bikes are going to be the next big thing, and they're fantastic pieces of equipment. It's still cycling, and we just need to think of secure parking because these things are expensive, and we also need to think about facilities for charging them up. If you've ridden your e-bike all the way from Pershore, you might want to plug it in when you're doing your shopping in Waitrose.
Thank you, Peter. That might also come with the Pershore active travel options. Charles, would you like to take Pershore, or would?
That's okay. I'll kick off.
Yes, I'll if need be.
But first of all, can I say everybody, I'm sure Evesham Pershore knows how active the Vale Passenger Transport Group is in relation to buses and train travel. So we didn't look at that at all. Quite happy to leave it to Julian and crew. Obviously, Pershore is much smaller than either Evesham or Droitwich. And thank goodness we haven't had yet the major development which has generated large Section 106 funds for things like cycle routes, etc. I think that may change in the future, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed about that. Obviously, there's a very big scheme which has been agreed by Wychavon for a cycle and new footway along Wyre Road to link up to the new bridge which is proposed, to the Northern Link Bridge, and that will create a route which enables people to go across the bridge and into the area, the new car park which is proposed on the northern side of the railway line for people who are going on the route east. So that's going to be a very significant part of a bit of development for active travel. But there are a number of other routes, obviously, which we need to think about. Oh, and by the way, Peter, you just stole my thunder about e-bikes, because that's one of the things that we feel is most crucial. And everything you said about security and charging points is exactly what we feel should be done in Pershore as well. And I think that you're quite right. It is the thing that's going to happen in the future. We'd very much like to encourage it in Pershore. And Chris, you mentioned that there was going to be a new cycle shelter. Thank you for letting us know. And when that is put in, and I hope you'll discuss it with us where it's going to be, then we would like that to have secure facilities for e-bikes and also charging points for e-bikes. We've a number of limited opportunities for improving connectivity. Pershore doesn't want to see improved connectivity along the main road towards Parkway, because we don't want to encourage people to take that route to the train station. We want people to come to the Pershore train station, and so we're encouraging connectivity up in that direction. However, we would, there's a significant potential for a new cycle route, which we would like to see the County Council investigating, which is to turn Walcott Lane into a proper cycle route. Walcott Lane, obviously, for those who don't know, comes from Drakes Broughton. And with the large amount of development in Drakes Broughton, there's a really good opportunity to create a cycleway from Drakes Broughton over Bowbrook, coming up to meet Station Road opposite the station. At the moment, that's a very narrow little lane. It's overused at the moment by heavy vehicles because of the development that's taking place in the area. And that's something which Mark and I and Liz, my wife, and also Rob Adams I know are quite concerned about. So I think this is something which really where the County Council needs to look at the possibility of making that into a cycle-friendly route, because it will enable a substantial amount of new cycle traffic coming in from Drakes Broughton, coming and going from Drakes Broughton. We didn't really talk about the opportunities in the southerly direction, but Wick and the Combertons are places where there is a potential for substantial new traffic, new cycle traffic, and going up I can see it being possible to go into Wick and then from Wick across into the other villages. And if you remember for the Tour of Britain, a lot of that was used as part of the routes there. A route which is clearly possible is the extension past the Pershore station on over the existing railway bridge and up towards Pinvin. Now that depends really on traffic management along Terrace Road into Pinvin. And again, I know the County Council are aware of the concerns about traffic in Terrace Road. Liz has been banging on about it for years, but the creation of the Northern Link Bridge and the reconfiguration of traffic coming into Pershore along Wire Road rather than coming in on Terrace Road offers an opportunity for a cycleway and walkway, improved walkway over the old bridge, which will then create a cycleway going up towards Pinvin in that direction. I've mentioned about the e-bikes and charging points. Yes, please. We very much want that to happen. We wondered whether we ought to, as a council, lobby the Department of Transport. Is that what they call it now? About the highway code. Cycling is mentioned in the highway code, but I feel that there could be a greater concentration on there and a greater concentration on what I'd call good manners for drivers when passing cyclists and taking greater account of cyclists on the road. Those are the things I have thought about. Michael, did you have anything particular you wanted to say?
Yes, please. I speak now.
Yes, please,
Okay.
Michael.
It was a very interesting meeting. Thank you for organising it, Mark. I don't know how many people are active cyclists who are discussing this. I'm one, or was one, until I was knocked off my bike in the High Street in Pershore, and was lucky to get away with it. The problem in Pershore for cyclists is that the main through route is really quite a dangerous one.
Yes.
And that's partly because it's straight, and because people are traveling, unlike Evesham, too fast rather than too slow. And particularly the Bridge Street section heading out of town, you've got a clear sight of a long straight road and people accelerate down there. The only solution apart from making people more aware of cyclists and that I can come up with is stopping parking on the one side of the road, which effectively narrows that down to a single track, particularly if there's a lorry coming in either direction. And it's extremely unsafe to be cycling along that section at any time of the day or night because of the parking on the right. I believe that the council did consider a purchase of a field to the right-hand side as you're heading out of Pershore to create a car park. There is a field to the left-hand side, which would be equally unsuitable when it's flooding, but if we think of the number of times it floods in a year, it's probably a maximum of 10 days. So for 350 days, you could have a car park similar to the one down by the river, by the football field in Pershore, which is an all-weather car park. Doesn't have to be fully paved, but brick paved. And to ban parking in the main streets through the centre of town. It's easy walking distance from there. We're very fortunate it's such a small town. And on the days when it did flood, you could lift the parking restrictions and let people park in Bridge Street. Then you would have a genuine 2-lane highway and it would be quite safe. I've had my back of my head knocked by a passing lorry wing mirror on that stretch. And I've got a wing mirror and several times I've had to go up onto the pavement because stuff is coming which is clearly going to hit me. So I think that it's encouraging cyclists to feel safer in the centre of the town. We could have very many more people accessing us from the villages and the new developments on bicycles, electric or otherwise, if they felt it was safe to do so. Currently, I don't think it is. I don't know if the heavy vehicle problem can be counteracted because that's another inhibition for cars and cyclists. We have very big lorries coming through the centre of what used to be the A44 and is no longer, but it's still being used as a major through route. And some of them even go down Priest Lane, which has the same problem as Bridge Street in its parking is allowed on one side. So it's effectively single track. Years ago, I investigated possibility of an axle weight on our bridge. I don't know if that's a possibility to make sure that the bigger lorries actually go around the town rather than through it. And all these things would mean that cyclists would feel safer, including me when I get back on the bike.
Thank you, Michael. I echo all of those points, and I'm particularly interested in trying to remove traffic off Bridge Street instead of parking and looking at see if we can find a car park. We can create permits for residents of Bridge Street so they can park there gratis, as it were. So just to alleviate what is, although there's a 20-mile-an-hour zone through Pershore, that is, for most drivers, advisory, but when parked cars at both sides of Bridge Street, it is a very narrow bit of road where if you're cycling, it is a challenge with cars trying to pass you on a single lane carriageway effectively. So I would echo all the points that Charles and Michael made.
Just a further point, if I can.
Yes, Michael.
It's not just cars moving, it's cars stationary and the door opening syndrome.
Yes,
What
yes.
got me.
Yes. So I think if the road is wider, there's more chance of you
avoiding it.
giving a wider berth to parked cars because of the naturally wider carriageway if parking were alleviated, shall we say. So
and
I think it is.
People crossing the road from between parked cars. That's a big question.
It's a challenge. It is. Has anybody else got any comment? Yes, Robin, and then Alex.
Yeah, on that point that Michael very clearly raised, removing parking spaces for cycling is specifically not part of Worcestershire County Council's policy. They have declared that they will not give up any parking spaces to make space for cycling and walking.
I think spaces. We're creating a car park for them.
My response to that is that the major accidents in Bridge Street have actually been cars coming in one direction, not being able to get through. And in fact, one car climbed on top of another one on one occasion because there was no room for it to go, so it had to go over the parked cars. So it's not just cycles at all, not Bridge Street.
I have to say I'm not in support of this particular policy.
Okay. Alex and then Peter. So Alex.
Yeah, just a point of information really from me, just to clarify. I've got great sympathy with people who are cyclists. I'm not a cyclist, so, but I am very frequently a pedestrian and walk my young grandchildren. And one of the things that we often say, and I wonder whether the Highway Code covers this, is there actually a speed at which cyclists can safely ride? Is there anything within cycle lanes or anything where cyclists have a minimum speed? You're talking about dangers to cyclists. I'm looking at it from the point of view of the safety of other road users when cyclists are around. I've often seen cyclists going too fast, what I believe to be too fast. I just wonder if there is any guidance in the Highway Code. You did mention that. I'm not being anti-cyclist. It's just a question, really. Thanks.
Electric cycles have the governor on at 15 miles an hour max, I think. I don't know if that's a guidance, but 15 miles.
That's quite fast, isn't it? That's quite speedy.
Yeah, but that's an electric one.
Can I just
do more than 5?
Yes, Robin. Yeah.
Cyclists have every right to be on the road as just as much right to be on the road traveling at appropriate speeds as any other road user. To be honest, you adjust your speed according to the road conditions. So sometimes 5 or 10 miles an hour could be probably the safest option. At other times, well, I can get up to 40 or more going down a hill. So it really is a case of adjusting your speed. And I certainly don't suggest that we should have any additional restrictions on cyclists. I think we should learn to share the road together.
Okay, Peter first, then Charles.
Can I just chip into the argument about ridding car parking spaces from our high streets? And I'm talking about this in the widest sense. I'm not just referring to Evesham or Pershore in this particular sense. The problem that I perceive with this is that you look at any of our little small towns that we've got, apart from Broadway, which very successfully has eliminated cars from its high street. Our high streets and shop frontages are completely ruined by the dominance of parked motor vehicles. And I want to talk about this later, but there are many, many reasons, apart from the clear road safety aspects that has been raised earlier by others. But there are many other reasons why our town centres would definitely benefit from improved formal parking and less informal parking along the curbside in the high streets.
Thank you, Peter. Charles, do you want to
yes,
have a comment?
2 things really. I'm ambivalent about the proposal for taking the cars out of Bridge Street in Pershore. My feeling is that once you've cleared the road, there will be nothing to stop the racers coming through there. And whatever you say about parked cars, they do act as traffic calming, and limit the speed of, or make it more obvious when people are speeding. And if you take the cars away, I think it will not necessarily be any safer for cyclists, because traffic will move quicker. And we know that already the police do nothing to enforce a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, or haven't up to now, and we remain to see whether they will enforce it in future. And I can see actually more problems rather than less. The other thing about having a car park outside the town is, will people use it because of the security angles and their cars being remote from their houses, etc. Those are some reservations I think I have. But going back to the e-bikes, I would really like to see this panel pushing and feeding back to the executive board the need for some positive encouragement for e-bikes. We've talked about secure parking, we've talked secure places to keep them, talked about charging, but also financial incentives, I think are needed to get things moving. And I would very much like to see this panel pushing to the board to put some financial incentives into e-bikes, either through subsidized purchase or purchase and hire out schemes, that sort of thing. But it's something which is waiting to happen, and if we give it an impetus, it'll happen in our areas as well, very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Okay. Oh yes, George. Yes, we'd like.
Cheers.
Thank you.
I was hoping to refer back to an earlier point about surveying bike parking and things in the town centres. I was hoping to ask Chris if that's already happened in Droitwich, or if that's being planned.
That's for you, Chris.
Sorry, I missed, you broke up a little bit.
Chris, the question was the survey of bike facilities in Droitwich. Has that happened yet, or is it going to happen?
The plan is to get around all three towns and try and identify the places in conjunction with the parking services manager. That's obviously a bit harder now that she's on long-term sick leave, but we have to identify a space or spaces, car park spaces, ideally near to Morrison's, where a shelter could be put. So it's not, it's about following best practice. Best practice from the Department of Transport says they should be near to where people want to go, i.e. to the supermarket, and they should also, you should be seen to prioritise cyclists and indeed motorcyclists, apparently. I didn't know that, but that's brought into it as well. So that's the plan. I haven't had a chance to get out there yet. As I say, slightly made harder by the situation with the parking services manager, but yeah, it's absolutely going to happen. I will trudge around Droitwich, perhaps with George actually, and we can have a look and spot the best place to put a shelter.
That was actually what I was going to go for and ask if I could be invited, because there is a small amount of bike parking next to Morrison's, but there's definitely improvements. And I think one of the points that's come up a lot has been aesthetic around bike areas. So that's whether it's the visual pleasure of cycling trails, which I do think massively improves the use that they get, but also the aesthetic around bike parking, so lighting for safety, cameras, visibility of them. I think the new bike racks that were built at the Droitwich train station are great, but very, very well hidden, I think, is the issue with them.
Okay. Thank you, George. Okay. Sorry, Martin.
I was going to say, I'm sure that going around Droitwich with George is not supposed to be a drudge.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've covered point 5 quite extensively. Sorry, point 6, sorry. Going on to, therefore, pavement licenses. This was raised at the last meeting in terms of seeing what people thought of them in terms of a short-term stroke, long-term strategy to aid premises imposed, well, during COVID-19 and potentially after it, or whenever it might end. So can we have member views, including whether we think pavement licenses should be more long-term rather than a short-term answer at the moment? I'll take Peter first if it's a short question, and then Charles, and we'll go on from there. Thank you, Peter. And George after.
Sorry, I have lots to say about this as well, I'm afraid, but because it's something I strongly believe in. I think pavement licenses should become a permanent feature of trading in our high streets, and not specifically limited to pubs and restaurants. There are plenty of other businesses in our high streets who I also feel could benefit from such facilities. I do appreciate in some towns it's more difficult than others. In Evesham here, we're very lucky. We have very wide market streets because we were a market town. And as the panel is probably aware, the arrangements for pavement licenses has recently changed, I think in early September. And whereas before it fell under the County Council Highways Department to sort of give it effectively was an easement, I think, allowing pavement trading, is now governed by Worcester Regulatory Services, and it is a proper annual license. I'm unclear as to whether people who have been trading on pavements under the old system are still, because that permission that they were given was a sort of done on a lift and shift basis. So if the Highways Department decided they didn't want it anymore, they could just serve notice and they would have to remove their arrangements. Whereas now they have a proper license. I think the fee is £100 and it lasts for a year, and it's effectively full planning consent. I would certainly like to lobby very strongly that these pavement licenses are automatically renewed. They can remain on an annual basis, of course, but are automatically renewed on payment of the fee. Because that will give those businesses who are taking advantage of it the surety and the guarantee to make the necessary financial investments apart from anything else. You know, they have to buy furniture and equipment and in forms of enclosure, bits of landscaping, whatever. And so I think they need to be given some sort of surety that it is certainly, should they wish it, to be a renewable situation. Obviously, if it is still on an annual basis, if there is a problem, then that annual license can be withdrawn under sort of more exceptional circumstances. But the important thing here is that we should actively encourage street trading. Our towns were historically market towns, and the market towns thrived because they were great places to be, because you know, on certain days of the week, you went up and down the street and all sorts of market trading activities were going on. Fruit, vegetables, animals, food, you name it, it was being traded. And I think that we should be encouraging that type of activity. And just a quick final point is that I think we should look, going back to my previous car parking statements, we should be looking at parts of towns which are dominated by cars which are used for car parking, that we could remove and turn that space over to street trading, maybe of a slightly different nature, maybe to have farmers markets. Wouldn't it be great across Wychavon to have proper farmers food markets, you know, 1 or 2 days in Evesham, 1 or 2 days in Pershore, 1 or 2 days in Droitwich, in a designated place? But that would, people would come to that. We could encourage our local food producers, of which there are many, many, to come and trade in our town centres. And I think it would hook in very nicely to all of this discussion over pavement licences. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Charles and then George. So far, Charles.
I think that the pavement licenses are a good idea. I think they help to improve the trading environment in the town. The only thing I would say is that it's an accident of where you are as to whether you have got an opportunity to have a pavement license or not, because obviously nobody is going to want to put their business some distance away from their premises. It needs to be contiguous to the premises, in, you know, just for practicality. So that limits where there is an opportunity for street licensing, pavement licensing. Now, I know that there are 2 premises in Pershore which have taken advantage of pavements and putting their wares on the pavement. One that has been going on for many years, and whether they come under the scope of the new pavement licensing arrangements, I don't know. I'm only aware of one premises which has secured a new pavement license, and they've been very pleased by it. They got it under the original scheme, and I presume it is still in force under the new scheme. What Peter was saying about the idea of renewing licenses automatically after 12 months on payment of the fee. Well, why does there need to be a fee simply to renew a license? The original fee of, I think, £100 is in order to investigate and produce the paperwork and all that sort of thing. But to renew it, what is the extra cost? So I don't see why there needs to be an additional fee, an annual fee, or if it is an annual fee, it should only be a nominal fee, because it should reflect the work that is done, not be a set fee, which doesn't relate to the amount of work that's done. But I agree that there is scope for further extension of the idea. The problem in Pershore, in a lot of cases, is that there just isn't the pavement width for a lot of the shops that probably would like to have pavement licenses. The pavements are too narrow. Evesham is in a good position that way, but Pershore isn't. You know,
if you got rid of some of the car parking, Charles, you could create the width.
No, you couldn't, because there aren't any shops down there.
No, that's true.
So there you go. I've had my say.
Thank you very much, Charles. George, you're next. I think you want to comment. You're muted, if that's okay.
Right, you are.
Thank you very much.
I fully agree with Peter that making renewals or renewing licenses should be as easy as possible. I think a small check would still need to be in order to make sure nothing's changed. And I agree with Charles that if that was the case, that the renewal fee should be cheaper if the checks were fewer. But I think that the important bit is to keep high streets for all people and make sure it doesn't impose on any sort of disability access, which would be a similar case in Droitwich as to Pershore, where there's along the main high street, there's not really any space for any footpath, anything to go on the footpath, being quite narrow as they are. But I think that needs to be the main focus, is that access stays or remains for everyone.
Good point, George. Any other comment? Oh, yes, Alex.
Yes, just to say, Peter, and that we do actually have a very successful farmers market in Droitwich, which is in Victoria Square in Droitwich on the first Saturday of every month. And I think it'd be lovely if we could actually revisit our charter market, which used to be every week until a couple of years ago. And unfortunately, the chap who ran it, unfortunately, had to retire. Not being able to afford find anybody else to do it. Of course, Victoria Square, where it is a perfect area for a market. And actually, Charles, you're dead right. The High Street in Droitwich, for instance, is not very suitable. And when we actually have asked the traders along there, there's a very strong anti the idea of pavement trading feeling there, as well as the people who are pro it. But I do think the idea of the farmers market being extended to the rest of the district is a super one. And it's the Worcestershire farmers markets generally. And it does work very well. And perhaps we could look into recreating the charter markets. But you do, Charles, you're dead right, need the space. And of course, the particular space in line there is ideal, just outside the library in Droitwich. But we have got the geography of elsewhere.
Thank you, Alex. Rachel, would you like a comment?
Yeah, I think what Peter's been saying, I absolutely agree with, and I think pavement licences, although it's not, we can't utilise that much on the high street. Certain cafes are down Gurney's Lane, which is really helping them, and it's been really popular so far. I think there's been talk with other people as well. Down the high street would mainly be, feeling was better about having it, if it did close, for a market to be down there on certain dates. And a lot of things with food was definitely a good pull for that. Finding space, somebody's even brought up an idea quite a while ago of even a car boot on the side of, not on the short stay, I think it is. So behind Waitrose car park, to the left of it, by Vines Park, using the upper level of that on a Sunday for something like a market or a car boot to pull people down into the other side of the town as well, and by Vines Park. So there's scope there to do extra things and have it in different areas, you know, to pull people around the town. And I think it's a good idea about what you were saying about the markets, maybe one of them going with the same people from Pershore, Evesham to Droitwich. So they do travel within the three areas of Wychavon to go and get the food from the trader that they like. And that continuity might be quite good as well to help all three people move and have people moving around more within the three areas rather than going to Worcester or Birmingham or Stratford for it.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other comments at the moment on the pavement licences?
Mark, do you mind if I sort of make a few comments? Phil,
no problem, Phil. Yes, carry on.
What I'm conscious of, and why I'm keen to get the views of the panel to take things forward, is that the government's powers on pavement licences is part of the Business and Planning Act. And at the moment, it's like an emergency sort of specifications on that. So September 23rd, 2021 is kind of the end date of that legislation at the moment. So it's a bit of looking beyond that potentially going forward. Part of that is lobbying, and obviously if COVID restrictions go on much longer into 2021, which is a good chance that's going to happen, then that act could be amended and those dates sort of pushed back. But I'm also conscious that we've benefited greatly in Wychavon by having a very good highways liaison officer in Barry Barnes, who's really issued lots of those agreements using powers from the Highways Act. There are some district councils, and I'm thinking of Worcester City Council, I'm thinking of Cheltenham Borough Council, that actually adopted the highways powers previously, historically. So that might be an option for Wychavon going forward. What I want is a sense of a recommendation to the panel to take to the board to whether we, with the legal team here with Misha, really explore whether that is an option that we can use existing powers for Wychavon to adopt to give us a little bit more control in the future.
Okay,
Final comment in terms of farmers markets. Wychavon was one of the founding fathers of the Worcestershire Farmers Market Group going over 20 years ago. Historically, Evesham did not work very well, and that's largely, I would say, because there's lots of farm shops in Evesham, and actually the fact that Evesham has such a wealth of local fruit veg options is actually the farmers market was never great sort of footfall in generation, and Droitwich has always been actually a very successful location for that. Pershore historically took the view that Broad Street was the right place to do it. Don't do it on a monthly, do it on special days, which in recent years has only been on the Plum Fair on the August bank holiday. You know, that option exists. You could actually close Broad Street to farmers markets on other bank holidays during the year, or even on a monthly basis. So that's something for Pershore, and if we've got a traders group, Pershore, that's a discussion that could be held. But okay. I suppose the key thing, Mark, is a sense from the panel. I think we've got that, is whether we pursue these legal powers going forward in terms of payment licenses.
Thank you, Phil. I will bring that up again at point 10. So I'll leave that particular recommendation to then. Any more comments on pavement licenses? If not, we'll go on to item number 8, which were the recent events in terms of the open air cinemas. And obviously we've talked about markets in terms of the previous pavement license. So perhaps this point should be on the open air cinemas. Now, from my point of view, I went to Pershore's event with my family, which was extremely well organised, socially distanced, with nice painted white rings on the grass, so you could be in a particular area. And I think we watched I can't remember. Monsters Inc. And it was excellent. It was a really enjoyable evening. The whole family enjoyed it. And I think it was very well attended, probably 200 to 300 people there. So as far as Pershore's open air cinema event on the Friday night, it was a great success. And I think it should be commended to the council, the officers and the people who actually organised it. And it perhaps should be a more regular event going forward. So that's my view on Pershore's open air cinema event, and I'm sure perhaps other members of the panel who attended it might have a comment, and I feel I'm happy to open it up to the whole panel for both Droitwich and Evesham. Yes, Rachel. Then Peter.
I went to the Droitwich one with my children and friends, and we thought it was fantastic. It was received brilliantly. It was really well attended. Everyone had a really good time, and it was socially distanced. The facilities were really good. You know, marking out, like you say. The venue was perfect, I think, because you kind of felt enclosed in Droitwich. It was down to the side of the AstroTurf pitch, so it was really well organised how you went in and out. And everyone, I think it was just nice for people to feel like they could get out and do something without, you know, having to be worried all the time of the distancing, because it was organised and everything was planned. You didn't have to think about it. You just went and sat down and, you know, watched your film. It was brilliant. So yeah, fantastic. And I'd love to see more of them arranged.
Thank you, Rachel. Any other comments at the moment? Alex and then Peter. Alex.
Totally agree with both of you. I think there's been very few positives to come out of COVID. This is one of the few, and I think it's one of those things that when we actually come out of this dreadful disease, that we should actually actively encourage and repeat and carry on as a regular feature, because I think these sort of, if we're trying to get a sense of community, these sort of events, and it could grow, we could have stalls and whatever there. I do think it was a fantastic idea, and I commend the people whose idea it was, and like Rachel says, the organisation and everything. And I do think it's something that we can take away from this dreadful year we've had so far as a positive. And I'd be very much in favour of that. And in fact, expanding it to cover different parts of Droitwich and to add things to it, not just do film, cinemas, add other sort of events too. So yes, I completely agree.
Thank you, Alex. Peter.
Yeah, I completely agree with everybody else. A wonderful and very real community event. This is what it's all about. The arts in general need to be looked at in a much more positive way, in my view. If you employ the arts, it will make our town centres much more agreeable places to be and to attend events and that sort of thing. The arts plays a very key part of any civilized society, and cinema is one of the major parts of that. But as Alex rightly says, no reason why we couldn't expand that into theatre, into concerts, into all sorts of other things that you might imagine that you could do in a similar way. They don't all have to be free and at 100% cost of the council. Maybe we could consider investing in some equipment, portable staging or portable stages and PA equipment and all that sort of paraphernalia that groups might require to be able to put on such events as a community project to support these types of things. But yes, all three towns put on marvellous events. The Evesham one was fantastic, absolutely fantastic, wonderful atmosphere. It was really, really good. And yes, let's make it annual. Yes, Alex, let's expand it and make it bigger and better. And, maybe think outside the box a little bit. And maybe this is something genuinely that we as a district council can support all of our communities in doing.
Thank you, Peter. I'll have a quick comment as well before Alex responds, but I think this illustrates the whole high street going forward, in that the high street needs other draws besides the current retail opportunities. And this just illustrates that in Pershore, it was well attended. So the drivers into the towns will be different going forward. And this illustrates the fact that the arts and event-driven, experience-driven events pull people back into the towns. So the traditional retail avenue for a destination is still there, but I think that this shows that there's alternative draws for people coming into our town centres. And it doesn't always have to be an evening event, it could be a daytime event, so that other traders in the towns can benefit from the increased footfall. So it just illustrates the fact that doing something else pulls people back into the towns, even during these crisis times. So I think it's a really positive thing. Yes, I'll go to Alex first, Martin, then I'll come back to you. Alex.
One thing that strikes me as well, I mean, we obviously didn't have it this year, but we have a bandstand in Lido Park, and we normally do the regular Sunday afternoon concerts. And thinking about it, we underuse it, the bandstand. One of the most amusing and innovative things I saw happen on our bandstand during the summer was that the boxing club obviously couldn't use their play anywhere indoors to do anything. So there were people having boxing lessons and using the bandstand as a ring, which I mean, I live very near it, so I saw this. But I do think, it's something we could do. We could perhaps say, look, we don't use it enough. It's stuck there 365 days of the year. It's used 15 Sunday afternoons. Perhaps then again, and sort of expand that. It's next to Lido Park with the Lido, next to Lido with all the swimmers there, and something perhaps we could look at expanding as a cultural event. So something to take out of what we've been going through. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll go to Martin and then you, Rachel. Okay.
Thank you. I'll resist the temptation to ask whether Alex was taking the boxing lessons or not. Just going back to Peter's comment about the council considering buying staging and PA equipment, I just raise a question of hesitation there, not because it's not a good idea, but would it be an appropriate use? Would we be opening ourselves up to issues of health and safety and maintenance and all sorts of things rather? And would we make enough use of it? Or may it be that we try to look at making arrangements with providers like the company that we used to be able to get better facilities and better services for people taking it up? Phil might like to comment, but I'm just not sure that actually going out and buying it would be the best way. We may be able to assist in other arenas.
Thank you, Martin. Rachel first, and then Charles. So Rachel, what do you think?
Yeah, I just want to say that's a brilliant idea Alex just said about, especially for people like the Salvation Army as well, who are struggling to find places to be able to do their band practice. If they went out and just did that in the bandstand as well and other things, and that would be helping them out too. Maybe, can it be weatherproofed in any way? Maybe to think about, to see if we can use it more during rainy months. That was all.
Thank you, Rachel. That's an interesting point. Charles.
Yes, the bandstand in Pershaw in the Abbey Park is owned by the town council, and for a number of years now we've organised every Sunday in the summer bands in the park. Unfortunately, we found over the last year or so that the audience has dwindled, and there can be times when there are 3 times as many band players as there are people listening to them. Now that may be to do with publicity, and perhaps this is where Wychavon could help more than anything else, is to assist with the publicity so that more people are aware of these events and can come to them. But going back to the question of PA equipment, a few years ago, the Pershaw Carnival had some funds which it received from Rooftop as one of their community grants, and we approached Wychavon. I say we because I'm a member of the committee there of the carnival, and agreed that Wychavon would part purchase or put funds into the purchase of PA equipment, which would be used by the carnival but would also be available for other people. And it's been used by Plum Fair as well as Carnival. It's been used for the River Festival, the same equipment, and it's been very helpful. So although I take Martin's point that Wychavon wouldn't necessarily want to take all the responsibility for this equipment, if there was other bodies which were looking after it or managing it and using it, I think it's a good use of limited amount of funding to make something happen which otherwise wouldn't happen.
Thank you, Charles.
I'd agree with that sort of approach. There's not a one-size-fits-all in this. It's case by case.
Just chipping in there, I'm just mindful. Last time, obviously, we didn't have Battle of Evesham this year, but the previous year, I know that, I mean, they had a PA system there, which I don't know where they got it from, but they really struggled with it and it wasn't working. And I would have just thought that if we've got some publicly owned, decent quality equipment, you know, looked after by the right people, clearly, it's more the capital cost of these things, you know, which is where I was thinking we could help. You know, it would be relatively easy to cover off the maintenance and the health and safety side of it. But, you know, by paying somebody to do that. But I just think that this sort of equipment, I can think of a million uses of it publicly once people know that it's available. Going back to the Charles's point about publicity on these events, I know, in fact, I know the guy who organises bands in the park because he's got an office here in my building. I'm sorry to say, I think it's very unlikely bands in the park will continue anymore because he's now gravely ill. And I think it's unlikely he'll be able to continue, and I don't think there's anybody else will take that on. But anyway, that's an aside. On publicity, Evesham has lots of events through the year anyway, on Crown Meadow, Corporation Meadow, Market Square, and all that sort of thing. But I've often struggled to find a comprehensive diary of those events. You know, through the summer, it would just be nice to have somewhere where you could go to, like, what's on this weekend. I mean, there's stuff down at Hampton Ferry. In fact, I find, Robbie, your information is more readily available. We always seem to know what's on down at Hampton Ferry, but not necessarily what's on Corporation Meadow. And likewise in Pershore, and likewise in Droitwich. If we got some sort of Wychavon timetable of all these public spaces and public events which are going on, collated in one place, would be very useful.
Thank you. I'll go to Richard first, because you might have a comment on that, and then to Robbie, if that's okay.
Cheers, Mark. Yeah, it's just to answer Peter. If you go to Vale and Spa, they have a What's On page on Vale and Spa. It may not be exhaustive, but it's pretty damn good in terms of all the events going on. I
was sort of aware of that, Richard, but there are a lot of things which don't appear on it. That was my frustration. I suppose it is down to the people that are putting the events on to inform Vale and Spa that it is going on, but I don't know, it just seems to be, you know, and do people know that that's where they go to? Do you see what I mean? The information, I'm sure, does exist, but it just doesn't seem to be handy somehow or other.
You're right, it needs feeding back. It's only as good as the information it's gathered. So we just need to make it more aware that that's the point of call, really.
Thank you, Richard. Robert, do you want to have a comment?
Can I defend Angela Taylor's diary? I think it's an excellent publication. Covers the whole of Wychavon, and I find that really useful throughout the year. The problem with it, and it's not Angela's fault, it's the contributors. She puts it together in September, October, November, whenever, this time of year, whenever she's doing it. And of course, a lot of events are not planned until the new year.
Yeah,
so it
that's
needs
a problem.
to be something that's perhaps if it was every 6 months and rather than the annual thing, that might be a better way of producing it. But I think what Angela does to promote Wychavon and the events that go on is first class.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. That's well said. Any other comments on this subject at the moment?
Mark, it's Phil. Just to sort of say,
sorry, Phil.
When we did the open air cinemas, I think we optimistically felt that was a bit of a launch pad for cinemas in art centres reopening. So the Regal and Number 8 and of course Norbury that we helped. And I'm very conscious with those events, what we didn't want to do was replace, you know, existing businesses and community organisations who are doing fantastic work. And I think maybe I personally was optimistic that was the launch pad for those centres over the winter. I think circumstances have meant that, of course, and I'd be very interested in Michael's take in terms of how Number 8, or even yourself, Mark, is a patron of the board there, how in Number 8. But I suppose it's made my mind we probably have to next spring, when we can do outdoor events again in a more larger scale basis, what the opportunities are. But I would want to always do that with the art centres and people like the Regal Cinema, so that we're not completely trying to replace their activities.
I think that's a wise point, Phil. Michael.
Yeah, Number 8 has weathered the last few months very well because of its structure. With 200 volunteers, we have a very, very small paid staff, and the two main people were furloughed. But the program has reopened and the program has been published. The only thing we're not doing is live shows. We're doing beamed in and cinema with a reduced auditorium size with distancing, and the coffee bar has been reduced as well. But the response has been terrific. And one of the nicest responses was that, of course, a lot of people had pre-booked tickets and were entitled to be a refund, but the majority of them said keep the money, which was very welcome. So it's back on its feet and it's open and active. But as I say, the overhead costs of running that are very small, and it's the model which has sustained us. And of course, healthy financial performances have given us a back pocket where we can fund this for a bit longer. So it's going very well.
Yes.
I don't know that there was any direct connection to the event in the park, except to give people a taste for coming back to the cinema locally. But it seems to be there, and we're getting good audiences.
Thank you, Michael. Alex.
Yes, just to add to that, the Norbury, I'm delighted to say, we're very pleased to be involved with the events, the cinema open air event. They had a stall there. They're also, like I mentioned earlier, delighted that we're supporting them, trying to do something over Christmas. And I think it's a great idea that we, as a council, should be supporting the various arts events and arts people. I know they're delighted that it won't be a lot of support we can give, but is some. But I think it's the fact we're physically interested and want to publicise what they're doing. And I think publicity, I think on various other issues, is very, very important. And hopefully we'll be able to do that in some way. But I know the Norbury as well are surviving. I was worried they wouldn't survive, but they will survive. And they're full of enthusiasm. And as I say, they're delighted that we're involved with them, Switchaven. And long may it continue. And I'm glad the Regal are surviving as well. Sorry, the number 8 is in. Sorry.
Thank you very much. A point on that, everybody, and particularly Phil, is that the open air cinema, I think, was a really useful starting point for this. And I think if it does go ahead, let's say, for example, annually, I think the fact that potentially cinemas can have a presence at those events to market their own ongoing weekly events might be a positive thing, to appeal to a wider audience that they might not always reach. So I don't know. I mean, it might be something that we can actually do, but to actually proactively encourage the local cinemas to actually attend the events simultaneously, to actually market their own events during the year. Michael.
Yeah, they could provide trailers for the program for the upcoming year.
Yes, exactly.
Before the main film.
Yeah, so they could actually do something to actually promote themselves to a wider audience that they wouldn't necessarily reach.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think it's neither or. I think it's an adjunct and a marketing tool for the local cinemas, potentially.
What we learned, Mark, was being able to do those adverts and promotions before the film was shown. I have to say, I didn't anticipate that, but we kind of wanted to promote Wychavon Leisure. And it was amazing, actually, within a couple of days, sort of discussions with the cinema company, we were able to do a film clip at the start. So it gives me more confidence next time we do it. We can do a lot more promotional activity and messages along with the film.
Yeah, so you don't actually, there's nothing context.
Lots of adverts, but why not?
Just a few, just to say that not in conflict with local providers, that you're actually encouraging them as well. Peter.
Yeah, it just reminded me of a food festival which I've experienced quite a few times in Menorca, in our local town in Menorca. Once a year, they put on a food festival, and it's promoted by the local authority. People attending pay a small charge. It was about, last time I went, it was about €8. But at that event, every local restaurant or food producer had a stand, and they would produce their signature dishes or whatever, and you would go around and you would sample all of these things and sit down at tables. It's a great community event, but I mean, it would work as well, as was just suggested, with these more arts-based activities. And so creating these community events can generally be a springboard for other businesses. So it's not going to compete against them, it's actually going to enhance them. And very similar along a very similar idea. I just remembered that experience myself, so I thought I'd mention it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments on the events? Sorry, Richard. Yes.
It's just on the agenda. It's saying with the impending festive season, And we've talked well and confidently about cinema and various activities. I'm not sure we've really talked about Christmas and how important that is to the traders, and if there's anything that could be done.
I think, well, that's a key point, partly because I'm not quite sure what COVID will be doing over the festive period. And I think that it will be a real challenge, because I think most retailers rely on the festive season to fund their following 4 to 6 months. You know, it's a significant portion of their income. So that is a challenge, I think, and I'm not quite sure how we'll address that with regard to potential COVID developments going forward in the near future, because obviously the festive markets may or may not take place in places like Worcester and other places. But Charles.
Thank you. Yes, it's good. It's a good point to move on to. I know that Pershore Town Council has now decided that they can't have the Christmas tree light switch on, which was also had fireworks display as well, and that was funded by Wychavon, with many thanks for that. But it's not going to happen this year. But I'd like to know from Phil and Chris what is actually planned. Do you think, are the events going to continue that normally you had, like the free car parking in the 22nd of November or whenever it is, around about that date? And are we going to have a Christmas market, Christmas farmers market, as we have in the past as well? And what are you planning to do, or what do you think we're going to have to lose? Thanks.
The short answer is I don't really know. I don't know what Pershore's plans are. Pershore Town Council lead the Christmas event. We do put some funding into it to support some of the activities, and Steve has always helped out in practical ways. But it's going to be down to Pershore Town Council to decide what they want to do. Broadway Business Association cancelled its 2 late night shopping events some time ago, hence the extremely sensible and I think it'll be a very effective approach they're taking, which is this 12 Days of Christmas campaign. And it needs that. That's what's so good about working with business groups, that kind of come forward and say, this is what we want to do instead. So I know that Steve and Curtis, in fact, is leading on working with the Broadway Business Association on that one, to make sure that we promote it through all our social media channels, etc. And that will be successful. And that's about trying to get people to come into Broadway over a period of time. And it's this trail idea, going into shops, picking up clues, getting prizes, etc., rather than having everyone descend into massively busy Friday nights, which is what's always happened until now. So I think it's about working with the local groups. We've got to, we're not going to say, you're doing this or you're doing that, because it's about whatever the local organising groups want to do and how we can try and work with something that works for that town, or in Broadway's case, that village. So it's an ongoing discussion, really. It's difficult. It's difficult to know exactly what you do and what the what the restrictions might be. So we're planning as well as we can with those local groups to try and make sure we can get people into the towns and Broadway, but not with that big bang approach.
I think, Charles, we will talk to the town councils and the business organisations and try and identify something, individual to each of the towns. So again, I think we're welcome to hear other people's thoughts, but I think Chris makes the point is whatever we organise, we need to be flexible, that it may have to get cancelled within very, very few days' notice of it, because we don't really know how this COVID restrictions are likely to sort of change over the next few days, let alone the next few months. But I for one don't want to cancel Christmas. I think we have to be doing some activities with businesses and town councils to really still promote those business activities in the run up to Christmas, because Mark makes a very good point. We know that Christmas run up, November and December, is so critical for businesses retailers to survive January, February, March, which are typically sort of quieter months.
Yeah. Well, the free car parking evening is always well received.
Yeah, but I think free parking also has to be associated with some other activity. I think free parking on its own, I'm not sure we generate lots of footfall. I think it's got to be associated with some activity of some sort.
Yes. Go to Alex first and then Peter, if that's okay.
Just saying, wearing my other hat as leader of Droitwich Spa Town Council. Yes, we obviously can't do our normal Christmas lights, which are but we're going to have the Christmas lights because we're under contract, and obviously we want to not cancel Christmas. But I'm interested in these other ideas of things we could do, and I think it's something we should closely look at. And I know we have the vice chairman of our CNA committee on this panel as well. So Richard, it's perhaps something we could talk about, and George there too. And I'll take on board what you're saying, Phil. Actually, we can't just leave it. And I do like the ideas, some of these other ideas that I'm hearing from Broadway and other towns. So it is something definitely we need to look at in the very near future. But obviously we can't do it. It's normally one of the biggest events we organise in the year as the town council. It's obviously something we can't do this year. But I completely agree. We've got to do something. And thanks for raising it.
Yes.
What do you think, Rachel? I mean, what's your feeling, Rachel, as one of the traders in the town? What's your feeling?
I think you're right in what you say. We do rely on this Christmas period to carry us through January, February times, and we lost that over summer. So we have to clawed back now what my quiet time personally would be now. I think something definitely needs to happen to encourage people around, but obviously not, like you say, in huge groups. So I think that 12 days of Christmas event would be brilliant. I think before it was Christine who did she got gift vouchers and did a raffle and likes and shares on the pages and things like that. I think maybe, I mean, we've took it on our own back really to do a pumpkin trail thing through the high street. So me and Claire Fellows at the Old Cock as well have said to do window displays, and we can do a bit of a competition and people could go and vote who's got the best window, just to get people down to have a look in the windows to see what shops are there and what there is on offer. I think there should be something really pushed about shopping local and keeping the independent businesses, you know, going to buy gifts from there, whatever that is. So maybe showcasing something like that would be really good. I don't. There's also Black Friday in the meantime as well in November, so I don't know if that can maybe be picked up on of what flash offers might be available from local independent traders too. But I think maybe I know previously in Droitwich we've done Christmas card designs, and Nickel & Co picked up replying to every child, and we had a post box for the cards to be posted through. So there's lots of things that I think we still can do safely, and encouraging the kids down to the high street, whether it's posting their letters to Santa and things like that, and we can get that back up and happening again. There's a lot of things we can do. It's just being careful of obviously maintaining the social distancing and evening it out.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Rachel. Peter, from yourself.
Just a quickie. I don't know about events, but I just wonder whether Wychavon couldn't support its traders by some sort of advertising campaign, which I'm sure we already do to a certain extent, but could it be perhaps a bit more thought-provoking and conscience-pricking to spend your Christmas pound in your local town rather than donating it to Amazon? I just wonder whether we could put a sort of fairly hard-hitting, fairly punchy advertising campaign together to encourage people to do all these things and try. We as a family are certainly intending, doing spending our Christmas money locally, but I think perhaps people could be encouraged to do that rather than resort to the online thing, which they have done in hordes over the lockdown period. Thanks.
Thank you.
Just to say, really, there is, I think Gemma and Curtis are doing little videos of independent retailers and businesses in the town centres. So on our social media feed, there'll be a regular sort of highlighting of independent businesses to pick up really the point that Peter's making is support your independent local traders and don't just spend your money on Amazon and other national and international websites. So it is very much the work that the two guys are doing on supporting businesses.
Thank you. Richard. You're on mute. Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. Yes, I think some good points have been raised. I think we have to appreciate how behaviour's changed at the moment. And whereas shops relied heavily on Saturdays previously for people being at home at weekends, that doesn't happen anymore. Saturdays are a lot quieter because people are largely home working, and therefore traders happening throughout the week. And we may need to encourage our traders not to have half-day closing like they once did, maybe, because they're missing out on potential trade. That may be part of the behaviour change. The summer planting, I know Droitwich well from that. It was enormously successful, helped mental health. Far more people at home were walking around the towns. And a bit, the Christmas lights falls into that category. It is a bit like your summer planting over winter. So the winter planting, but also the Christmas lights is really something that needs to be emphasized. I think people want to see Christmas lights in this festive season, and they will take their families out to look around them if we put good displays on. And I think that's where we need to be putting the money and the effort to really show off our towns in an luminous way. So I would encourage more of that from each town to really celebrate the season.
Good point. My only impression I'm getting is that it's more like a slow, progressive Christmas event rather than a single event going forward, because I think the single events are going to be difficult. But I think if we can create as Rachel and others have said, a more protracted Christmas event or period of time, so that we spread out attendance over a longer period, I think it's probably the best way of doing it. And I think if we can look at ways of doing that, either by improving illumination or providing incentives for shoppers or children in terms of pumpkin trails or whatever else it might be, so that to encourage people to go into the town centres to basically partake in the events such as quizzes or trails or finding something on the high street to just, increase footfall. Yes, Rachel.
Can I just say that Gemma and Curtis have been fantastic as well in what meetings and things that we've had. I've only briefly met Curtis once, but when I've been sat with Gemma chatting and the emails that have come through, what they're doing is really good.
Excellent. That's really encouraging to know. It's great. It's nice to know that it's all working very well in that respect. Any other comments on the festive offerings and how we can actually support the high streets over this coming period? No? I think we probably covered the fact that a single event might be difficult, but a protracted offering is probably the best way of doing it. And if we can work up ways of encouraging a long-term or a longer-term festive experience rather than a particular event, I think that's the way to go. So we'll try and leave it at that at this stage. Moving on to number 9, which is the work plan, which probably hasn't changed very much from the previous meeting. So perhaps, Phil, if there's any, if I can pass to you, perhaps to see if there's any changes or updates to the work plan, which is basically COVID-19 effectively, isn't it?
It is. I think COVID's going to be hanging around for some time, unfortunately, isn't it?
Yes, but, yeah. So
I suppose in terms of the work plan, it's a little bit of moving the items along that we've talked about today. And I look at the sort of programme of meetings to come. 7th of December, I would certainly like Curtis and Gemma to actually come along and give an update of the town centre's recovery. At that stage, we can talk about Christmas events and so on. It'll be very relevant on that. I've also sort of scribbled down that Karen's Lewin, in terms of our active travel officer, would be good to programme in. It's probably a question to the working groups in each of the towns. I think it would be helpful for her to have actually had a report from each of those groups, so that she's got a chance to reflect on that, and really whether she comes along to that, the 1st of February meeting, maybe?
Yes, yes.
On the 7th of December, we will obviously be able to give an update in terms of the town centre prospectus interviews that we've got next week. So we will provide an update in potentially the sort of fact that we've commissioned the consultants, and if we've got consultants in place, then actually I think they probably should be part of the 7th of December meeting.
I agree. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
So I think that probably makes me think, Karen, active travel, to make that a focus on the 1st of February.
Yeah.
Is that okay? I think that gives
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other comments on that from anybody? Peter?
I just wondered if there's room in our work plan to thoroughly investigate this possibility of a rotating farmers market across the 3 towns, maybe even to include Broadway, 4 towns, for it to happen on a rotating basis weekly. It's a question of identifying places where it could be within each town and how often it would meet. It might need some support to begin with till it gets going, but Droitwich have this very successful one, and I can see no reason why it shouldn't be successful in the other towns without competing against the businesses. We could even encourage the farm shops around and about to take space to publicise their own business. It's just, I wonder whether we could find space in our busy plan to investigate that proposition.
I think we could make, put the question, there is a organised Worcestershire Farmers group that, I have to say, I'm not quite sure how well organised it is these days. I think Henry Wormington, who kind of led that, he was replaced a year or 2 ago, but we could put the question to them, bring an answer back to the next meeting.
That'd be good, yes. That'd be good. Okay, so moving on to messages from the meeting, to the executive. Oh, sorry, Charles. Sorry.
It's specifically on the messages from the meeting. I did ask whether it was possible for the panel to ask the executive board to look at the possibility of putting money into the budget for subsidising the purchase or the encouraging the use of e-bikes.
That's on my list, yeah.
That's on your list, right? Sorry,
Yes,
I was just jumping in there a little bit, Mark, too early.
That's right. Well, I'll kick off messages for the meeting. One of which is the e-bikes and the potential. This is for both Richard and Martin. E-bikes, financial incentives and potential charging points and provision for e-bikes to be able to be used, so that we can increase active travel for people who are perhaps less able to cycle but would like to cycle anyway. So that's one thing we'd like to put forward to the board. Another one would be the pavement licenses auto-renewing, and I think potentially allowing Wychavon to take powers, or have the powers to actually provide those licenses under planning, rather than going from the government Planning Act, which so it's more locally based action. So the farmers markets potentially, I mean, that's coming back to the exec board at the town centres board with regard to Phil, so that's probably not a message for the exec board necessarily, but those 2 points in terms of pavement licenses and active travel, specifically e-bikes, are perhaps 2 messages that I've got so far. Has anybody got any additions that they might like to raise with the executive board? I can't see any hands. Martin and Richard, are you happy with?
Alex Alex was working.
Sorry, Alex, I missed that.
Sorry, I think our support for the events that took place and an active support to repeat those. We had a long discussion on that. I think we all supported the idea of those being extended, repeated and extended. I think
very wise. Yes, sorry. Yes, yes. There's another point. Obviously, the annual cinema events were very well received, and the recommendation is to have those again with supporting the local cinemas and expanding those events to provide perhaps other art forms at either other times of the day, stroke year. So just to reiterate that the events were successful, and we'd like to see more of them and expand them slightly if possible where we can. So those, I think, are the three main points. Are we happy with those?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Charles, briefly, then I'll go back to you, Richard. Yes.
Very, very briefly, the subject of publicity was raised, and we're very pleased with the diary that already exists. But is there an active way in which it can be updated, say, on a monthly basis, if new events come along that weren't in time for the original publication? Can they be added on, say, a monthly basis?
Can I comment on that, please? Because they already are through social media. As I forget to point it out earlier, but they were quite right to say that there was Robbie said, things have to be planned in advance, and that's why the hard copy is what it is. But we do already, as long as people tell us about any event coming up, if it's a week's, 2 weeks, 3 weeks notice, it will go out on the social media, either through the website, through Facebook, etc. So it does happen that perhaps we don't have enough of an Instagram presence, for instance, and I have asked the Gemma Curtis to push that, but it does happen through the social media forms at the moment.
I have to say, in terms of social media, I'm a little bit of a dinosaur when it comes to social media, but the good news is people like Gemma and Curtis and Steve Knight and so on, they know what they're doing with it. If you remember with the outdoor cinema, we probably only about 10 days before the events actually finalised the details and started to publicise it. So I was quite worried after putting all the time and effort into it, a bit of publicity, would we only get a handful of people turning up? Social media was our only way of publicising that, and we got between 250 at Pershore to 500 at Evesham solely on the back of social media. So it convinced a dinosaur like me that actually social media is the way forward. So maybe Charles, with the bandstand in Pershore, it's the bit of, can we help the town council to get the social media messages going? Maybe social media might not be the automatic audience for your bandstand audiences, but we can always try.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any other comment? Oh, Richard, yes, sorry.
Cheers, Mark. There were 3 good updates on active travel today, so appreciate that. But I think Phil said it, but I think it's something that needs to be drawn into a conclusion that we need those 3 updates in reports to be supplied to the active travel officer to actually move forward with and to work with each of the groups. So it becomes an actual action from the meeting.
Yes, I know that Pershores can be generated extremely quickly because we've had our meetings with regard to Michael and Charles. How close to a report are Evesham and Droitwich? Because obviously we'd like to, if we can, bring it to the town centre in November, so that there's time to circulate it and give it to Gemma and Curtis and people, so they've got time to actually look at it before the December meeting.
Can I speak about Evesham? Robin, Martin and I haven't physically met about this, but I know we've all been looking at it on an individual basis. But speaking for myself, I don't see why we can't put together a fairly reasonable report, not too lengthy, but we do have our plan. I don't know what Robin and Martin think, but maybe if we could meet next week at some point, we could quickly put together a report, I don't mind doing the secretarial work and typing it up and getting it out to whoever needs to be. So I think we can certainly do something for Evesham.
Yes, please. It's just it needs to be like a short document. It doesn't have to be extensively detailed, but it just needs to cover the points that you need to raise. George, sorry.
As far as an official report or like a detailed report, there isn't one, but I could definitely write up the forward plan as a report.
Perfect.
As part of the pretty recent but existing efforts towards active travel, I did create quite a detailed map of all the existing cycle infrastructure that I could find in Droitwich, and where myself and other cyclists felt more infrastructure was needed. Yeah. But there's no evidence, it's not an evidence map, so that I could add in.
Yes, please. Yeah. It's all useful. Yeah. So if you could do something reasonably quickly.
Yeah, I should be able to get that done today, hopefully.
Okay, so excellent. So we should, within a week or so, be able to provide a summary reports to officers so that they can look at them, so that in December's meeting we can have something tangible to look at for Gemma and Curtis and everybody else to actually move this forward to a conclusion and actually have a firm recommendations for each town.
Just to confirm, it'd be Karen Lewing, there's the new active travel sheet.
Oh, sorry, yes. Sorry, yes. Sorry. My mistake. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, yes. Yeah, thank you. Yes. Effectively for Karen. Okay. Any next bit would be any other business. So has anybody got any other business they'd like to raise? Alex.
Sorry, just a question I probably should have asked after the minutes. Where are we with the contactless payments in car parks?
Yes. I'm not sure whether Phil can answer that, or
I know a bit about it.
Oh yeah.
Initial ones, I think, as I reported before, put into Broadway. And unfortunately, the 4G signal isn't nearly as good as it should be. It transpires once the kit was in. So the car parking team are currently looking at all options, which include, for instance, putting an aerial of some sort to be a bit higher up and get the 4G better, possibly a fixed line solution as well by putting a phone line into the existing public convenience in the car park and moving the pay machine. It works okay early in the morning and when there's not too much demand. Unfortunately, when there's a lot of demand, it doesn't work so well. I mean, other people have said to me they've noticed this in other car parks in other parts of the country. So it's not that unusual a situation, but it is undoubtedly frustrating. It works fine at the Milestone car park, the football ground car park in Broadway. So as regards to the rollout for the rest, I don't know, and I have to again reference the fact that Christine Baxter, the parking services manager, is now on long-term sick leave following an accident, and so I do need to pick up with one of her colleagues and find out what the latest is.
All right. So effectively, there's a delay to it, or to the rollout.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine. Thank you for that, Alex. Any other business on any of the business, please? I can't see any hands raised. So if there's no other business, that does conclude the meeting. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending and for all the discussions. And just to say, the meeting will close effectively at, what time is it now? 12:40. And the date of next meeting will be the 7th of December at 10:30 again. So please click on your diaries and look forward to the Zoom meeting invite. I'm sure it'll be on Zoom. So I say thank you very much for attending, and
thank you.
Speak
to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. See you Wednesday evening.
Indeed. Thank you. Goodbye.
Cheers. Bye.
Now, I'll be meeting for next week.
Should we have a little break?
Yeah.